One of the best and most sensible things that came out of yesterday's budget was the abolition of the two-child benefit cap. Very controversial for some, much common sense for others. I'm going to break this down and go through the pros and cons of this argument and see where you land on this. But first of all, before we get into the details in the video, if you do like this channel, please do like and subscribe. Please do leave your comments below. I do love reading your comments. I don't have to agree with all of them, but I do love reading your comments nonetheless. Thanks very much for joining us here. I do appreciate it on Andy Talks. So before we get into the detail of it, I just want to see what the Chancellor actually said yesterday at her budget. So I'm going to play you probably a very short clip from the budget yesterday where she's announcing the abolition of this two-child benefit policy.
And there are many reasons why people choose to have children and then find themselves in difficult times. The death of a partner, separation, ill health, a lost job. I don't believe that children should have to bear the brunt of that. And neither can I, in good conscience, leave in place the vile policy known as the rape clause, requiring women to prove if their child has been conceived non-consensually to receive support. I'm proud to be Britain's first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. I take the responsibilities that come with that seriously. I will not tolerate the grotesque indignity of women of the rape clause any longer. It is dehumanising, it is cruel, and I will remove it from the statute book. And so because I am tackling fraud and error in our welfare system, because I am cracking down on tax avoidance, because I am reforming gambling taxation, I can announce today, fully costed and fully funded, the removal of the two-child limit in full from April.
Okay, that's enough of that. No, I don't know if you know, like me, you probably can't stand these political theatre in there, all the shouting and jeering and the nonsense that goes on. I find it really frustrating, to be honest, really frustrating. This is how policies are made in this country, and they're shouting and jeering at each other across the table. But here we are, just seeing the Chancellor announce the abolition of the two-child benefit policy from April next year. Now, this has obviously been reported widely in the media, obviously in the BBC here, it's been talking about it here. Most of the media has covered it in fairly big detail. But what I've been really taken back with is the commentary from a lot of people. Fairly predictable commentary from a lot of people. So what it means for me is lazy people getting paid for having kids with no incentive to go to work. Or political truth one on here. The decision to have more than two children has and always will be made by financial ability. This ensures a child's future, barring personal disagreements, etc. And anyway, this one says that it should be reached by one child. It's disgusting, more lazy, getting the workers harder-earned money. It's prostitution to be paid for to open your legs, and so on. That is fairly typical of a lot of the, in my opinion, uneducated reaction to the change in this policy. And so I want to just go through some of the arguments for this, because I think it's one of the most sensible things in my personal opinion. But let's just address what it is first of all. So what is the two-child benefit policy? Contrary to what some commentators have said, this is not where people only get child benefit for two children. This is actually, because child benefit in itself is its own entity, which is a fairly tiny amount of money. Child benefit itself is paid to an unlimited number of children that you have if you earn under, I think it's 50 grand a year or 80 grand a year or something like that. But what it's actually talking about is that if you have over two children and any of those children are born after 2017, April 2017 to be precise, you would not get universal credit or tax credits for that third child. In today's money, that amounts to about £70 a week, or roughly £3,500 a year, roughly, per child. So This was set out by George Osborne in the budget in 2015. It became into force in April 2017. And George Osborne said that families on benefits should face the same financial choices as families supporting themselves solely through work. And so some ministers went on to say that the state should not incentivise large families, claiming parents should take responsibility for the number of children they have. Now, on the face of it, that's quite difficult to disagree with. It's a great soundbite. It do make a lot of sense. As Rachel Reeves just said in that clip I just showed you, there are a number of reasons why people might have more than 3 children. It isn't just a carelessness. Quite often it's through choice. My own daughter. I know that she was in a happy relationship. They had 3 children together. They were both working at a time, despite the fact she had 3 small children as well. And the relationship fell apart. She could no longer work because childcare was too prohibitively expensive and not available where she lived. And she had at the time 6-month-old child, and so she couldn't work. And so she was immediately cut off from having any support for the 3rd child. And then went to live, on her own, raising 3 children together, and raising 3 children on the money she got for 2 people. And she really, really wanted to work. She really tried hard to find jobs, but it was impossible to find jobs with the childcare and childcare support, and that system being changing all the time to what childcare support was available. So she was unable to work, not through lack of desire, but through lack of ability to. So these sound bites that they come up with in here, really do get people riled up and get people making stupid comments like in the Daily Mail there. And it's not really very well thought through. So what have the effects of the policy been? Well, as we just heard from Rachel Reeves, it plunged roughly 500,000 children, 500,000 children, into poverty. And effectively, altogether, today, there are 1.7 million children in poverty that are affected by this 2-child benefit cap. And what this has such a knock-on effect for the families, for being able to pay for their rent, for their food, for their clothes, for the money for their children. And to do a bear on it, nearly 60% of people claiming this are actually in work. This is not just for people out of work, and this is what everyone thinks, it's just for people out of work. But nearly 60% of everyone claiming the child benefit, universal credit rather, that they're actually working as well. And so those affected, 60% affected by this 3-child policy, or 2-child policy, are actually in work and really, really struggling to make ends meet. So it isn't just lazy layabout like most people like to make it out. There are plenty of reasons why people aren't in work, mostly not by choice. There will always be some. You will never get rid of the some. But for most people, it's not by choice. So what are the effects of this policy? Apart from having 1.7 million children affected by it now, there's been numerous research being done over the last few years. For example, the New Economics Foundation in 2024 said the cost of poverty to the cost of poverty in children to the state is actually in excess of £3 billion per year. So this £1 billion that we were saving through not paying it out in George Osborne's way is actually costing the state £3.2 billion a year, roughly. And associated costs is to increase social services, increase medical, increase police services and criminal services. Across the board, it costs more money to support people in poverty through all kinds of different reasons. Then the London School of Economics, again in 2023-24, showed that deep poverty in early life increased costs to the state through increased NHS usage, higher mental health service demand, higher social care intervention, greater contact with the criminal justice system. And again, moving on, the Centre for Young Lives in 2024 said that young people born to the lowest income families were 13 times more likely to have a poor education and poor health outcomes by the age of 17. And only 40% of the most disadvantaged children reach the expected school grades. Okay, this is quite shocking stuff. This is quite shocking. Similarly, there was a University College of London study done in 2023, And that one found that children born to the poorest fifth of families were 12 times more likely to suffer from poor health and social outcomes, including lower educational outcomes, obesity, psychological distress, and smoking. And further analysis went on to show that low parental income or persistent poverty during childhood strongly predicts lower educational attainment, reduced adult incomes, and increased likelihood of poverty and adulthood, who then go on also to perhaps claim benefits in the future and not work. So again, from a health point of view, there's a risk of higher disease, high chronic disease, mental health issues, lower educational and occupational attainment, increased behavioural risks, including substance abuse and lower social mobility among those who grow up poor. These are major things. So just growing up poor means you're likely to be sicker physically, mentally, educationally. And it goes on. Children growing up in poverty have a higher risk of altered neurodevelopment, impaired early cognitive development, delayed brain structure maturation, and that correlates with lower educational performance and long-term social economic disadvantage. And so growing up in poverty has a physical effect on your brain, on the development of the child and the future prospects just through growing up in poverty. It's a huge, huge thing. We really do need to look at these underlying problems rather than the surface level amount of money or the surface level taxation that pays for these things, because the cost of society of having the children with neurologically impaired, cognitively impaired, delayed brain structure maturation. These are massive things. These will mean that there are less intelligent people able to work in the future, that there are less people that will enter the workforce, there are more people that enter the benefit system, there'll be more cost to the health and social needs in the future. These are huge, huge things. Going on, so the overall effect of the two-child benefit policy has been to disadvantage and impoverish hundreds of thousands of children, causing a dramatic worsening of outcomes for an entire generation of children. It's so huge. We can't understate enough how bad this has been over the last, now 8 years this has been in force. And the fact that people are supporting it, they're supporting this limitation of the benefits to only 2 children, really does not reflect the long-term effects it has on the families. And at the same time, we've had this implementation of the two-child benefit policy from 2017. There was a reduction in support services for children, like the Sure Start centres, like social services interventions, like other financial and practical interventions that were there to help parents who are in the most need. So systematically, support and underlying structures have been removed and taken away from the most vulnerable people in society. This has been a heinous act, in my opinion. And we saw the increases in attainment and the reduction in child policy that the Sure Start centres and the tax credit system actually had on families. And simultaneously, there's been a huge rise in food insecurity, food bank usage, inability to heat homes, to buy clothes and school uniforms, in these affected families. And this is directly correlated, because the families aren't affected by the cap, either because their income is sufficient to support it, or they have only got 2 children, don't have the same problems. It's only when you go over to this 3rd child that these problems start becoming into play. So it's really definitively and provably the cost of the policy causing these problems. It's not up for debate. This is the case. And where are we with this? So then there's at the same time as all this is going on, there has been no decline in the birth rate. Rachel Reeves said that just now as well. So George Osborne said it was there to tackle birth rate in poorer families. That's clearly failed. That's not made any difference whatsoever. But we are going to come on to birth rates in a minute, because this is a significant part of this conversation. And something we do need to address and look at, in alignment with this benefits for children policy we have. But we'll come to that in a moment, because this is critically important to the future of our country. And I think you'll think so too. So it goes on to say that there's further direct correlation between the benefit cap and lack of school readiness, including childhood development indicators such as vocabulary, cognitive readiness, behavioural stability and emotional regulation. Now, this has effect on the schools themselves. It means that children aren't ready to start school because the poverty they're in has meant the parents have been unable to support them enough, potentially. So they're starting school without the necessary preparation. Where the parents themselves maybe aren't educated enough, aren't being supported enough to give the children that preschool education that used to be taken for granted and used to be part of a normal raising a child, at the basis that the parent themselves passes on the information that they know to their children. For whatever reason, this has not been happening and not going forward. And I think the lack of support, lack of social services and short-staff centres has been a part of that. And then finally, there's strong evidence to support that parents, especially mothers in the families, have a worse mental health outcomes as a result of this policy. This means that they are less able to work. They're more of a drain on the mental health services in the country. There's been prescriptions given out, and so they are themselves becoming inactive on the workforce, perhaps less effective parents, less able to partake in the school system, etc., etc. It's a direct result of the policy of the two-child benefit policy. Okay, so moving on now. So we're going on to what I think is really the crux of the matter here, or one of the big problems that we have to deal with that runs alongside it. Now, this is a big unspoken problem, and this is about the birth rate in the United Kingdom and many other countries around the world. But obviously we're talking about the United Kingdom here, because the birth rate in the United Kingdom has been plummeting for years. In 1970, the average birth rate was 2.5 children per woman. Today, in 2025, it's down to 1.4. Now, just to put this into perspective, the sustainability of a population requires a birth rate of 2.1 or higher. If the birth rate is not 2.1 or higher, the populations will decline. They'll go downhill really, really fast. And I want to show you just a quick slide here, if I can just bring this one up. If I can find it here, this is in the Financial Times. So this is the birth rate in the United Kingdom. And this is showing here, in 1940, this is right before the Second World War, birth rates were quite low, at sort of 1.6-ish, 1.7 there. And they constantly started to rise until sort of 1970-ish, when it got up to almost 3 per woman. And then from 1970 until late 1970s, there was a sharp decline in the birth rate. Now, this is when there are a lot of strikes going on, there was a 3-day week happening, there was massive economic and political uncertainty going on again. There was a huge decline in the birth rate there. And that crashed through the floor of sustainability of the two-figure there. And we saw it rise slightly after that when Margaret Thatcher came into power, and there was a bit of stability there. And then it continued then from 1990 to decline again quite dramatically, probably to the lowest levels on record so far. And then from the year 2000, this is a really interesting phenomena. From the year 2000 until 2010, here, the birth rates dramatically shot up from there's 1.6-ish to 1.8, 1.9 there, and almost be getting sustainable levels. And then after 2010 until today, they've just gone on absolutely free fall down here. Now, you might ask on here, what is the cause of this between 2000 and 2010? Well, it is my opinion, and I think there's a fairly likely that this has been caused, if you remember, by the Labour Party's introduction of tax credits, child tax credits, and national minimum wage. And so from 2000 to 2010, this is when that was most active, when the economy was really good. People were getting working tax credits and child tax credits. Child tax credits made a huge difference to the family security. There wasn't a limit on the number of children to it, and the birth rate started going up and up and up and up, which was that needs to happen. It really does need to happen. It goes up because there was some political security at the time, and people were feeling better off financially. We had approximately 10 years where it was relatively stable. Obviously, we had a great financial crash of 2008, and that's when things started changing a little bit. And then you can see from 2010, when the Conservatives came in, we had the austerity measures. It's just freefalled here. Now, this is not a political video, and I am not supporting either party here, but I do think that this correlation between 2000 and 2010, on this slide, I do think that is definably having to do with economic security and security of the country, and so that is a big part of the discussion that we're going to have today, and so let's just go on. So just to reiterate there that the sustainable birth rate is 2.1 in the anywhere in the world is 2.1, and if it falls below 2.1, populations start going into freefall. And what that means in the short to medium term is there are not enough people being born to support and sustain the society that we have. So if there are less people born today than there were born 20 years ago, when those people get to retirement age, there will not be enough new people to support them, both from a pension point of view, from a healthcare point of view, from a services and systems point of view. There won't be enough people to support the jobs and the companies in existence. And so when you get a decline in populations to this kind of extent, and I do have another slide I'll show you in a minute, but when the population declines to this extent, it has massive detrimental effects on the entire country. And so, in fact, I will bring up that slide now. I'll just get to the right page on here. All right, so this is from ChatGPT. We're talking about countries with a massive problem with the birth rates, and this is look at South Korea first of all. You might think this is miles away. It doesn't affect us here. Rubbish. Okay, so this has the lowest birth rate in the world. It's got a huge problem with it at the moment. Down to 0.7. Absolutely shockingly bad birth rates here. And so see some of the problems it's having. It's got schools closing nationwide. There are too few people to fill the classrooms. Teachers are losing their jobs. Universities are closing departments, just on education. In the housing market, entire apartment blocks lying empty in some cities. Property values are declining in some areas, and the government is being forced to buy up properties in others. There's a massive labour shortage. Young people are in short supply. These are people that work in the bars and the events and the gigs and stuff like that. Companies are competing for workers, and the government in South Korea is considering an immigration changes. And I'm going to assume this means that they are going to look at bringing in poor people into their country. I assume that is. Let me just remove that for a minute. I'm going to assume that is going to be bringing immigrants into the country, because otherwise the company is going to collapse. Now, what happens when you start doing that? If you bring too many immigrants in, you dilute the culture that's there. You bring in potentially people that are less skilled, the people that don't know the culture, that don't know the language, they don't integrate or identify it, and you displace your native population by bringing in foreigners, effectively, to substitute for the people you don't have. And where are you going to take them from? You're going to take them from the countries that are having the most children, and they're going to be the African countries and Southern Asian countries, potentially. Again, the further problems that are going on here for record loneliness, so there are less people to hang out with, to do things with, because people aren't being replaced. They can't get into relationships or get married or avoiding having children altogether. And so the government is paying people or incentivising people with cash payments to have children, to housing subsidies and free childcare. And yet it's still saying it hasn't reversed the trend. And again, this is on ChatGPT, so I'm not going into the further details of this. It's just because the country waited for too long. So we aren't at that point yet. We aren't at that point where South Korea is, but we're not far off it. When George Osborne introduced that policy in 2015, the UK birth rate was about 1.7. So it's gone down 1.7 to 1.4 in a short period of time, and it's still in freefall. That greater insecurity financially and politically is not going to do anything to redress it. And now that this lack of supporting people with universal credits or tax credits hasn't done it. So let's move on to Italy. Okay, so in Italy, similar things that they've dropped to 1.2. We'll be at 1.2 in probably 3 years if we carry on the trajectory we're on now. So in Italy, we've heard about it on the news sometimes, where you can pick up a house for £1 or whatever. So these ghost towns are spreading. Thousands of villages and small towns are half empty or deserted because young people are moving to cities where there's jobs. There aren't enough people to replace them with. Schools, hospitals and public services are all closing. This is part of the infrastructure and the fabric of a country. Once you lose these things, they're very difficult to bring back. They're very difficult to replace them, in terms of the labour and in terms of the resources themselves. And they're very tax-intensive things to start again. Local economies are dying because young people are gone. And young people do support the economies through eating out, through the restaurants, through the jobs, through entrepreneurship, etc., etc. Now, you start losing the people making the money, and there's no one making money and supporting the business and running the businesses in those places. And that becomes a huge, huge problem. So going on, there's pressure on the pensions. They're becoming unmanageable. They've got one of the oldest populations in the world. That means there's more people than anywhere else per head of population. And the ratio of workers to retirees is collapsing. Now, I think we're dangerously close to that in the United Kingdom right now. The proportion of retirees is getting higher and higher and higher, and the proportion of people coming in to replace them is getting worse. And we know the number of young people out of work is also increasing. So the young people in their early 20s that should be in the workforce, there's been something like 1 million extra people in the last 12 months, I think it is, that have started claiming universal credit. I think there are several million young people of that age category that should be in the workforce, but for one reason or another are not. So that does need addressing as well. But we do need a greater number of young people to be around. And if a few young people are left getting more and more pressured, they're going to have more and more mental health problems and more physical illnesses. And it's going to be a vicious circle. It's going to spiral out of control. So guys, Italy's GDP is one of the lowest in the developed world. Our GDP, we used to be the third largest economy in the world. I think we're down to 7th now. And we're going to, again, carry on falling. If there aren't the people to produce and to run the businesses, and not including all the people who are leaving the country and taking their businesses with them, but if there aren't enough people to produce and create new businesses, then GDP is going to fall. And then that's going to be catastrophic. Our economy, realistically, has been flatlining for years. We keep talking about growth of 0.3% or 0.5% or whatever it might be. But it's bullshit, isn't it? It's absolute rubbish. That we haven't really got a growing economy. We haven't done for quite a long time. It's stagnating at best. By the time you take into account inflation and the huge increase in extra costs we've had, you would argue that our living standards are going down and the cost of living is going up. So whatever the GDP number is, that isn't the end of the story, is it? Again, they're saying that businesses can't find workers, agriculture is hard hit, tourism, manufacturing, reliance on migrant labour to fill the jobs. And again, please do take notice of this. Huge reliance on migrant labour to fill basic jobs. And we're introducing all kinds of policies in this country to reduce the immigrant and ability to come here and to work here. But unless we do something quickly, we're going to have to rely on immigrant workers to do the jobs that need doing. And again, the government is forced to pay huge family subsidies So it now pays a monthly child allowances, marriage incentive, baby bonuses. So it's paying people to have babies. And I think this is probably, we need to do this at the moment. We need to do this now. We need now to be encouraging people to have babies. We need now to have monthly child allowances for all people with families. We do need to do this. I think it is really important because we need to incentivise young people to have children. And where was it? That was Italy, wasn't it? So this is ChatGPT. So the lessons for Britain here. If you don't support families today, your country pays 10 times more 20 years from now. So we're talking about Italy, Japan, South Korea, all with collapsing populations there. So it's a huge problem, and additionally to that, we're finding in the UK that people aren't starting families now in the 30s. Women are, it used to be 29 a few years ago and 28 before that. We're now up to 32, 33 before women are having babies now, and men are slightly older. Now you think that's okay because you've money under your belt, you're getting, you might have a house, you might get a bit more security. But the big problem with that is that women's fertility, by the time you hit 30, hugely reduces to in your early 20s. And it continues reducing year on year after that. And the amount of time you get left over to have subsequent children after that is also decreased. And if men aren't having children until 33, 34, their fertility also decreases. Obviously not in the same way as women do, but it also decreases. So if you have a decreasing fertility in both men and women, which we do, and a falling birth rate, and people having children older, it spells disaster, in my opinion. And many people are opting out of having children altogether. You hear this through environmental reasons, through gender identity politics, through environmental idealism, for concerns about the political and financial safety of the country, through global issues like Ukraine and other wars around the world. And people just generally saying, I don't want to bring children to a world like this. Completely understandable when we've had declining living standards for the last 15 years. And yet we need to address it. We need to do something about it. And so I want to just reiterate, I guess, again, the key issue we're talking about here. The only driver of immigration in the UK since the year 2000 has been immigration. Immigration has added, and including the children they've had since they've been here, over the last 25 years, almost 10 million people to the UK population. Just think about that. An extra 10 million people have come here. And yet we are not producing enough ourselves. And we're introducing all these measures to deter immigrants from coming. And we're having all these immigration problems because too many people have been coming for the size of our country and our ability to integrate them, and etc., etc. And yet, do we? We have two problems together. We have a massive immigration number. And I read earlier on it's gone down to 240,000 something this last 12 months, which is a huge huge decrease from the 460,000 it was the previous year, and a huge decrease from the year before that. So, but it's still 200,000 immigration number over the last 12 months. And so we have to look at some hard questions, don't we? But one of the things that we hear, and I'm going to come to that in a minute actually. So I want to just go backwards for just a minute to where I talked about the tax credits. So I want you to think about from the year 2000 until roughly 2020, when most tax credits were phased out and replaced by universal credits, every family earning under, I think it was £40,000 or £50,000, was supported by tax credits to some degree, through working tax credits and then child tax credits. Every single family was supported. And over that, threshold, it was deemed you to have enough money to live on anyway. But the taper rate was quite good. So for 20 years, we've had support in having children. And then particularly between 2000 and 2010, like I said earlier, when we saw that huge growth in population and birth rates, because people were feeling financially better off. And then, but so all families were subsidised. And then even from 2017, there's only been in the last 8 years where that hasn't happened. And so, we really need to look at that and think, okay, we managed perfectly fine before that, and we can manage fine again now. And not only can we should. We have an obligation to support our population going forwards. If we do not want to rely on immigration population. Poverty was drastically reduced, living standards rose between 2000 and 2010. And then we had a financial crash and a catastrophe of austerity, and that completely changed the ballgame. In 2020, again, we had COVID. We had a very questionable lockdown project, and to save our country from going bankrupt, we injected, inverted commas, borrowed, over £1 trillion again from the global banking system somehow or other, however that works, through quantitative easing, etc., etc. But the result of that is that we're now in £2.6 trillion of national debt. That is roughly 100.5% of our GDP at the moment. But the annual interest payments on that alone are over £100 billion. That is almost double what we spend on the entire education sector for our schools, colleges and universities, etc. So it again, we've covered that one. So I would say that the only solution here to this population problem that we have is to financially incentivise families to have more children. And that means through the universal credit system. That means paying more children £70 a week, more families £70 a week. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Through when people have more money, they spend more money, they buy more things, it supports the economy, more money is brought back in through taxes. But one of the most common arguments, and we saw it in that Daily Mirror thing just now, but basically, why should I work and pay taxes to subsidise freeloading baby making machines, or something equally historical? Derogatory and hostile to that. Now the question comes: do you want the country overrun by immigrants, where white British people are the minority? Do you want the country to collapse within the next 100 years due to low birth rate? And it'll be less than 100 years where we're going. It'll be much sooner than that. Both of these things will happen unless we address them immediately. Now, we talked already about the immigration, so you're not paying. So I'm referring to my notes when I'm doing this, so I do apologise for this. I made a lot of notes to do this video with, so I do want to be factually accurate and get the point across. But basically, you're not paying to have kids you can't afford. You're paying or other people can't afford. What we're paying for is the future. We're paying for the future doctors that will take care of you as you get older. You're paying for the workers that will pay your pension when you're older. You're paying for the healthcare workers. You're paying for other services that will be around when you can no longer work yourself. Now, historically, every generation has paid for the future generation. We wouldn't expect children to pay for the schools they go to. We wouldn't expect children to pay for the hospitals. Our parents and parents' parents and so on, for generations we've paid up front for the services that there are through taxation that then supported our children. So it's no different now, to doing that to support and bring people out of poverty and to actually help bring them into the workforce, and also then to pay people to have children through the scrapping of this two-child benefit policy, which does bring people out of poverty at a substantial knock-on effect. So the two-pronged attack of reducing poverty and incentivizing baby making effectively. And if we don't incentivize baby making, the only solution is to bring more immigrants, as we've seen from Japan, from Italy and Korea. That's the only solution they come up with, is bringing more immigrants into the country to solve the problem. Do you want to have a United Kingdom or not? No, the choice is binary. Either you support high immigration levels, or you support British families having more children. What is it going to be? Well, thanks very much for watching, as always. I do hope you've liked this video. It's taken a while to get through all the information. I hope you made it to the end. Now, if you do, please, again, leave a comment down below. Do like and subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts on it. Now, let me know whether you agree with what I've just said. Now, do you think that this is the only solution we have to this problem? Now, if you've got another solution, please do let me know. I look forward to hearing from you. Take care. Until the next time. Goodbye.